Hey, this is Steve from Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
And this is Ellen coming to you from the beautiful island of St. Bart's. And today we are talking with our friend and honorary Lumen brother, Dennis Size, on Light Talk.
Well, this is Stan in Gainesville, Florida. Today we find out how Dennis made last week's presidential debate look so marvelous. All on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. If you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
And sister.
That's right, Ellen. Welcome, everyone, to episode 390. And before we get started with this very special show, and timely, we would like to welcome Steve back from his extended vacation at a nudist colony on some tropical island. Welcome back, Steve. How is the buffalo milk?
It's not some tropical island. I was on the tropical, mysterious island of St. Bart's. They've got a small little nudist colony down near the Dairy Queen, and they did let me wear my cowboy hat and my boots, and it was just great. I got a little bit of suntan.
Was Ellen down on the beach too?
No, Ellen knew better. She knew that would just be a wasteland of ugliness down there, so she did not come down to the beach.
Well, for fans of Light Talk, there is a voice back there that I'm sure you recognize because Dennis Size is with us today. You know, you hold the record, Dennis, for most guest appearances on Light Talk.
You know, I wanted to find out if we're going to have egg roll today, because you know the saying, with 6 you get egg roll? This is my sixth appearance. I couldn't believe it.
Your Light Talk smoking jacket is on the way.
I'm waiting for it.
Yes, this is not an episode of Light Talk After Dark.
But we're not broadcasting video this time.
No, we're not. No.
Yeah, okay, because I didn't want everybody to see that I was nude.
Yes, you are nude, and so am I from the waist down, but we're not going to get into those details. Okay, anyway. Let's get started.
Zoom closed. Don't stand
up.
up.
Shut down, right.
Yeah, tops and no bottoms.
So let's get started. Ellen, could you please tell our listeners who haven't heard the previous 5 episodes a little bit about Dennis?
I'd be happy to. For any of you who don't know Dennis Size, he is Executive Vice President of Design at Lighting Design Group and has been involved in television since he tap danced live on the ABC broadcast of The David Blight Show in Pennsylvania at the age of 8. In 2024, he is celebrating the 50th anniversary of his first lighting design done while he was in college. For over a half a century working professionally, he has designed hundreds upon hundreds of major projects for theater and television for every broadcast network. The recipient of more than a dozen Emmy nominations, Dennis has worked with well over 100 directors on innumerable broadcasts, designing the lighting for over 1,000 episodes of daytime soap operas, lit every U.S. president since Ronald Reagan, not to mention the broadcast coverage of 3 royal weddings in London and 2 papal transitions in Vatican City. Since lighting his first musical performance at the Savoy Bar in Scranton, Pennsylvania for Cooney and his Country All-Stars and Paul and his P.A. Polketeers.
Hey, that's a good one. I think I was in that band.
Paul, right. You're a polketeer for sure.
That's right.
He has designed live television concert performances by dozens and dozens of legendary musical luminaries, including Elton John, Garth, Prince, McCartney, Usher, Britney, Beyonce, J-Lo, Mariah, Gaga, Miley, and Taylor. After lighting his first talk show, Time with Carol, as an intern at PBS WVIA in 1976, he has designed over a dozen celebrity talk shows, including Oprah, Ellen, Montel, Martha, Dr. Oz, and most recently, Tamron. Dennis recently lit the ABC broadcast coverage of the 2024 Republican and Democratic national presidential conventions, a project he has completed for several networks over the years, more times than he can remember. He also designed the lighting for the latest presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, seen by an estimated 70 million people. Dennis has been a proud member of the Lighting Design Group family for the last 27 years. Welcome back to Light Talk.
Yay! Woo, Dennis!
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
You know, you must have a monopoly on the political lighting scene because you've done it all.
I know. It's astonishing how many people keep asking. And you know what? I'm as apolitical as they come, and I try never to have political opinions, which is probably why I get hired by so many political parties. But I have something, though, before we get involved in this debate discussion, I have to get something off my chest. I know that I've said it many times that I'm one of the many listeners driving down the highway yelling at my car because of you guys and disagreeing with something on Light Talk. But for the past couple of weeks, you've been talking about programmers, and I think it was you, David, that said AI is going to replace your programmer. Then, meanwhile, last week, I think it was last week's show, you said that everybody should learn how to be a programmer, and Ellen brought up the issue of, doesn't a marketable lighting assistant need to be a programmer? And it turned into a heated discussion, and I don't want it to take away from this, but I'm going to throw my opinion out there, and then we can move on. Years ago, especially when I was doing ballets where there's never any money, and I'd say, okay, I'll do my own programming while I'm designing. And I'm envious of the rock and rollers that can do that. I find it's very difficult to focus on the stage, watch what's going on, then divert your eyes to a console while you're pushing buttons. And depending on the complexity, you could be pushing buttons for 30 seconds to get what you need done, missing a lot of the show. And I said, I can never do this again. And I never, ever now program anything that I do, and I choose to take programmers with me everywhere. If the budget doesn't sustain it, then I will take one of our assistants from Lighting Design Group. As a matter of fact, my current assistant who programmed the conventions for me is a student of Stan Kay's, Sloan Colsar from Florida, and he's a wonderful assistant. And as a matter of fact, all the drawings and the draftings that I sent you guys from the debate were drafted by Sloan. And as a lighting assistant who's a damn good programmer, he will be extremely marketable as a designer. However, that being said, I still don't think a designer should be doing his own programming, nor do I think you could rely on AI to be the programmer. And I agree 100% with the argument that you had with I think it was Jane Cox who was on. What I find, and I'll use the debate as an example. The debate was not only a debate in a debate hall, there were two other venues that were very important. The spin room, which was a half a mile away, and the exterior outside the building, which not only had to be lit for exterior shots, but there were 5 stages out there that were all broadcast stages for various networks and for ABC brands. Many times I had to go outside to check on things and work with my design team out there. While I was doing that, my programmer was doing busy work, for lack of a better word. You know, I would say, hey, the molding between those 2 video walls needs an accent. We'd set it, do that 10 more times on all the other molding. It would be very difficult to get AI to do that. I use programmers almost like design assistants, and too often I rely on them to make decisions on their own without me telling them anything. And that's going to be very difficult to do with AI.
You know what, Dennis? I think that once you set the first one, AI could definitely reproduce it for the other 9 moldings.
I gave that some thought. I disagree, because they're different. You know, one might be 8 feet, one might be 4 feet, one might be 6 feet, one might be an angle. It requires thought. It requires a design aesthetic along with experiential thought.
Right. Well, Dennis, had you not been yelling at your car speaker, you probably have one of those little AM radios with that little tiny little 3-inch speaker in there, right? And you were yelling at it. You missed my point, because I totally agree with everything you said. And I said I'm not a programmer, and I have to watch stage, all that stuff. I was talking specifically about the young designer who's going in and working at the local theater company who has no money to hire a programmer. Sometimes to get that gig, you need to know programming skills. So that was my point. That's all. But we agree with you. I mean, we had that long talk with Jane Cox. It was fantastic. We don't know what's going to happen with AI. We'll see, right? Anyway, let's get to the debate. Just overall, Dennis, congratulations. First of all, I didn't know you lit it at first. All right, because I kept on seeing these promos, these shots of the stage, beautifully lit with a preset with 2 downlights on the podiums. And I said, wow, that is gorgeous. Who chose this incredibly deep blue? I don't know. It wasn't Congo blue, but it was like the super rich blue.
It was close to it, yeah.
It was amazing. It was such a beautiful color. And the screens around it all had this beautiful blue hue to it. Who made that decision on that one? Because I assume there was an art director.
Oh, there were several art directors, but the main designer is the staff production designer for ABC News, whose responsibility is to maintain the look of ABC News around the country and for special events. We had actually done 2 town halls there in 2020. There were no debates, but they had a Biden town hall and a Trump town hall in that very same room, which at the time, Seth Easter, who's the production designer, used video walls to serve as background. ABC News decided to do the same thing, but in this particular case, there's a lot of history involved with the presidential debates and the Commission on Presidential Debates, the CPD, which has been in existence since 1988. And they're the ones that actually handled all the presidential debates ever since 1988. Matter of fact, you did an interview with our friend Jimmy Tetlow, and he was the lighting designer for all the commission debates for the last several decades. On the interview, Jimmy mentioned how I came in and helped him with a few of them that he had conflicts, but they were very rigid, very serious. They had very strict parameters, and for whatever reason that I don't know, the Harris-Biden campaign refused to debate under the Commission on Presidential Debates. And way back in, I guess it was probably March, they made it known that they would only do 2 debates, and they would not do debates under the CPD, and they had chosen CNN and ABC to do the debates on. And that made a real hue and cry, because they sidelined the commission, which had been set up many years earlier strictly to do this and to guarantee a certain amount of impartiality. And again, I don't know why they refused to do commission debates, but CNN did their debate, and ABC, it was at the time of the convention in August, ABC wasn't even doing the debate, because after the first debate that was on CNN, it was apparent that Biden wasn't going to debate. Trump said he wasn't going to debate, so there wasn't going to be another debate. And then in a 30-day period, it was just pure chaos. As a matter of fact, I was called to do the debate in Philadelphia, the one we just had with Harris and Trump, during the convention in Milwaukee. That's how soon all this was put together. Now, I think there were very strict parameters provided by the campaigns, many of which were announced in the papers, like mics that would be turned off, proximity, intimate proximity, no audience, things like that. They were trying to emulate the Commission on Presidential Debates, but not use the commission. As part of that, the commission always had, for 30 years, a very monochromatic blue background that had an accent of the first couple lines of the Constitution of the United States. It was the same damn set that they hauled out every single presidential cycle and used over and over. I have a feeling CNN did not go that route. They did it in their studio and tried to put a fair amount of production design into it. But there were a lot of quibbles, shall we say, from the campaigns about the look of the CNN debate. So they got more involved in the ABC debate. And one of the dictates was that the scenery should be barely seen and not heard. They wanted it to be subtle. They wanted it to be more elegant. And they wanted something a little more in line with the commission debates, which was the blue background and just having the candidates and the moderators lit. And that was kind of the marching orders. The set designer, oh God, I don't know how many video walls there were. You could just count them on the plots that I sent you, but there were layers and layers of video walls that they put content into. And as part of that, all the walls had various monochromatic shades of blue. And then the Constitution of the United States was basically overlaid into that, but in a more subtle way. Behind the moderators originally, there was the Constitution, but then on tech rehearsal, it was changed to visual of the auditorium. The auditorium was the theater, the Kindle Theater at the National Constitution Center, is a raked audience, like a bowl that goes up fairly high with an audience in the round, semicircular. So they had basically taken imagery of the empty audience that I had lit basically in blue, so it was subtle. You could see it, but you didn't have a lot of detail. And they put that in the video walls behind the moderators, so that on the reverse shots, all you saw was a sea of empty chairs. During the rehearsal process, when the ABC News management and David Muir and Lindsay Davis were there, it became a big bone of contention as to why we're showing all these empty seats. And it was actually David Muir that said, I would prefer to have the Constitution behind me so that it mirrors what's behind the candidates, so that the circle in the room was just one big Constitution. That's kind of how the design conceit actually developed. But in the beginning, when the set designer, Seth Easter and I on Sunday night sat down in the room to build cues, and he was working with his projection people from Fuse, it was much more up. The Constitution was more vibrant. The lighting was more vibrant in terms of its specific detail. And even on the floor, Seth and I had talked about projecting stars on the floor. We abandoned that because it was too specific, but instead I did a textural wash on the floor. I had all moving lights. They were all lone stars and halcyons, and you could do just about anything, but I was trying to keep it from being a boring sea of blue. So on the Sunday night before the debate, which was Tuesday of that week, we had a very textural, vibrant, somewhat up, for lack of a better word, look in the theater. And he and I were really quite happy with it. I thought it looked fabulous. Even there's metallic bars, mullions that separated all the video walls. I had put a gold accent that he had wanted to frame it out, and it mirrored what was in a lot of the graphics. The next day, when ABC management and the moderators came in, they had some issues, shall we say, with the vibrancy of the set, and they wanted it to be more darker, more subtle, more somber, which might not be the right word, but going in that direction. Depending on my mood at the time, I would sometimes say, "You mean drab and boring?" But that doesn't go over well with a lot of people. So you change the words from drab and boring to subliminally graceful or some other nonsense that we designers like to use. But it was a kind of a work in progress. And then the president of the news division, the executive producer of the show, everybody started weighing in on the most minute details during the rehearsal. So we ended up getting to a point that that everybody liked it, and I thought that the sea of blue, for lack of a better word, that was the floor, was a little too much, but they loved it. And just so you know, the color you had mentioned, cobalt blue, it was just basic blue. There was nothing special, but the carpet on the floor was blue as well. So with the blue light. And it was a blue light that was a mix of Mac-Ara blue that I had spotted so that you couldn't see it that well on camera, but to the eye, there was some shadow and highlight going on so that it just wasn't a boring blue wash. And we ended up settling on that. But in addition to the debate, the show World News Tonight was done live in the room, both Monday night and Tuesday night. and they just wanted to see the debate set in the background. It was on that show that I started playing because it wasn't part of the debate, and I had the very stark downlights on the podiums. I started putting more texture on the floor. We were making changes to the debate look to make the background look more interesting for the promos and the other shows that were coming out of the room. So there were a couple of different looks that went on, but I'm telling you, it was not taken very well. I've never seen a project where so many people had so many opinions about the look and about the process. During the show, I must have had at least a dozen texts from people, some of whom I hadn't heard from in years. One text said, "I don't know if you're lighting the debate, but this looks like your touch." And the text said, "The subliminal way the backlight just kisses the shoulders of David Muir." And I'm thinking, oh my God, this person is paying attention to the wrong things.
He's looking at David Muir a little too closely for comfort, let's say.
Yes. But there, normally I don't get people saying, tremendous work, good work, bad work, whatever. But obviously there were a lot of people saying, you're making Trump look too good. You're making Kamala Harris look too good. All of this nonsense that goes on. And I'm telling you, I never had any sort of input or personal messages like that before. It's absolutely crazy. I don't want to digress from the question. I think I answered the question about the blue floor, but kind of ending that, in addition to ABC management and Disney people weighing in on the look of this because they knew they were going to get a lot of viewers and they wanted to not offend anybody in the process, the candidates, as is custom on all presidential debates, are allowed to weigh in, and they come to a candidate walk-through where they were each given 1 hour to come in and say, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, fix this, that sort of thing. In this particular case, the candidates actually asked for all the drawings of the design, the plots, the scenic drawings, the content and the projections several days before. That's not uncommon on a presidential function, but it was very unusual that they were so specific. And the production designers started getting notes about the width of the podiums, or lecterns, I guess is the correct term, the height, the microphones, the extensions, all of this sort of thing. And then when they came through for the walkthrough, they also gave more notes about the situation. Interestingly enough, my memory of the Commission on Presidential Debates is that the candidates weren't really given that much of a choice. They were both given identical scenarios. And I remember that Jimmy Tetlow was always very concerned. The light hitting the wall behind them had to be exact for both lecterns. They even had thermometers on the lecterns to make sure that the air temperature was exact at both lecterns. In this particular debate, they allowed the candidates to kind of pick and choose what made them individually comfortable. I'm not sure it's a good thing or a bad thing. It was just an unusual thing because it meant for a lot of changes. Similarly, going back to your question, that was something that the campaigns wanted to make sure that the set was would not detract from them. So the darkened, subtle texture and the look of it, and blue is a natural color that makes people look very good. Not to mention it's evocative of a more serious tone. You wouldn't put yellow, you wouldn't put red. We all know what the psychology of color is, and blue lends itself more to this kind of event. What surprised me, however, is I had a lot of notes from management about lighting at the lecterns. Oh, it's too bright, or oh, they can't read the clock, or they can't read this. And I said, no. This will be fine. Trust me on this. I'm always wary of management people that are giving lighting notes because they're never on camera to begin with. So when we did the candidate walkthrough, the only note that I had gotten from the Kamala Harris people and from the vice president herself, who stood at the lectern and looked at the camera angles, and They bring out a monitor and they look at themselves and they say, oh, this is good or this is bad. The only note I had gotten from them was that they wanted her a little warmer. So we adjusted the color temperature of the lights to warm up her a little bit. But other than that, her camp loved the lighting, and they did have a lot of notes for scenery and certain camera angles, and they wanted to know where they're going to look and this sort of thing. And they actually came in the day before. Trump, who I've done many debates with him in the past, he's never come to it. As a matter of fact, I was betting my gaffer. I said, he's not going to show up. He never does. The guy shows up at 7 o'clock on the night of the debate with his campaign people and all the handlers. I mean, these people come with an entourage. And he stood at the podium, talked with the president of the network, talked with everybody. All he talked about was how lucky they were to have him agree to this debate because the ratings were going to be through the roof. He had recognized me not as Dennis Size, but as a lighting guy because I've done so many of these. And he turned to me and he said, this looks great. I love it. He turned to the scene designer and said, this set is wonderful. It's a great debate set. There was nothing but effusive graciousness, shall we say. So you can imagine my surprise when all of a sudden, days later, the campaign is saying how the lighting was designed to trick Trump into being distracted. And I'm like, where the hell did they get that from? You know,
it was the cat gobo that I saw the cat gobo.
There
that
you go.
Shined on the podium. So maybe that was it.
It was those eyes. Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, it's funny because everybody weighs in on this sort of thing and nothing goes on the air without everybody approving it. So to have disagreement after the fact is, I will, what is it that Steve says? Call Bupkis on this?
Bupkis, yes, there you go. So, Ellen, you want to take the next question?
Sure. From the paperwork and magic sheets you sent us, it looks like you used 8 channels for each candidate. Can you break down what these different angles do?
Wow, you really looked at those things, didn't you? When I used to teach lighting, and still to this day, if I do master classes, to have students understand it, and even myself, I always equate lighting angles to a clock. Whether you're looking at it in a ground plan format or in a vertical format, you could raise a clock vertically or horizontally. On the magic sheets, if you laid a clock over my magic sheets, you would have every number on the clock, basically. So if you could imagine that the person, a candidate or a moderator, is standing right at the center of the clock. I'm very big on side light. I will always use heavy side light. So there's always going to be a light to the 3 o'clock side and to the 9 o'clock side, which are the extreme sides, direct sides. There will also always be a light onto the nose from the 6 o'clock side. So if I only have, rule of thumb, if you only have one light, you got to light the face. So that's going to come from a 6 o'clock angle directly over the camera. If you have a couple more lights, then I always go to side light angles, which would be like 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. Now, on my magic sheets, you'll see between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock, there'll be 2 more lights or angles, which would essentially be 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock, and then 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock. So basically, you have a fixture at every angle from 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, with 6 o'clock being the camera point of view. That's essentially why there's basically 7 lights or 8 lights, because those 6 numbers between 6 and 9, I will always put a lighting angle in. The 12 o'clock angle, which would be a direct backlight, would be essentially the shoulder light or backlight. I'm not that big on backlight, especially when you're doing video walls. Traditionally, the backlight is essentially to pop somebody out of a background, and a video background, usually that'll act as a backlight. In some cases, especially in the case of David Muir, he hates backlight, refuses to have it. As a matter of fact, I put it in, I focused it because I knew I was going to need some separation. He will literally look up at me at the lighting console, because I always position myself on the floor, and say, Dennis, get rid of that backlight. He'll look to the sides. If I have let's say, a light at the 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock position, which would be cross upstage backlight, he'll say, get rid of those 2 lights also. He doesn't want anything around his head, behind his back. If you watch the show World News Tonight, which is extremely, I think it's the #1 news show on television, he loves the lighting on the show. He thinks it's the best lighting on television. I think it's the worst lighting on television, and I'm the lighting designer for the show. But it's what he wants. And traditionally, you watch something and you say, geez, the guy blends into the background. There's no separation. There's no highlight and shadow. It's just a flat wash. That's what he likes. And going back to the previous answer about how design ends up happening before it gets on the air, it's a committee of people that decide what you want it to be for you, and then you adjust accordingly. But anyway, going back to the clock face, that's why on a job like this, I will always do at least 6 front lights from direct front to side, because I never know what I'm going to need at any given moment. The trick, however, is not using all of those lights all at the same time. So that if Kamala Harris is looking to her right, to Donald Trump, and the camera that's on that side picks her up, I'll use that 8 o'clock key to get her as a key light. I don't need the angle where she talks to David Muir. And if the 8 o'clock key doesn't work, maybe the 7 o'clock key is a better angle. But I want to give myself the option of 2 different angles, especially when I had no idea where the cameras were going to end up in the space. They're listed on the ground plan, as you saw it, but it was an auditorium where they had to build platforms over the seats, and it doesn't always end up exactly where the director wants it. So it's a catch-as-catch-can scenario. So I had to give myself more opportunity. Similarly, we had to hang about 10 trusses in this room that the moving lights were hung from. So I had to give myself as many opportunities to maintain the correct angle that's needed that follows the format or the geometry, shall we say, that you see on the magic sheet. In a couple of them where there might have been 8 lights, that might have been because there was a double turn or there was something I wanted to accent. Or in the case of the candidates, because the angles were so steep, I actually put long throw lecos, I think there were 14 degrees, right over the cameras, way off in the distance, buried in the seats, to basically use as an eye light so that I could fill in the eyes a little better. Having dealt with both of these people before, especially Trump, his eyes are set someplace way in the back of his head. And despite what people say, or what people would want me to do, my goal is to make him look as great as possible and fill in his eyes, because we're trying to tell a story here. And years ago, when I used to work with Barbara Walters, she was very adamant about her eyes being lit because of certain inflections or ways that she would engage with her viewer. And as they say, the eyes are the mirror of the soul. If you can't see someone's eyes, then you failed. And it's really up to the job of the lighting designer in broadcast to make sure, we're not really lighting designers, we're shadow designers. And deciding where we're going to put the shadow or take the shadow away is the most important element in any lighting design. So that 8th light that you noticed, there were 2 lecos, one on Trump and one on Kamala Harris, that were really eye light uplights to fill in all the shadows under their chin or into their eyes, and coming from right over the camera, which is nothing ingenious. It's a film technique that goes back 100 years. Similarly, in the desk that the moderators were at, and I think Sloan actually put a photo on the magic sheet of the reverse of the moderators, I had the scene shop build in an LED trough that I could put eye lights in. I actually had 2 little mini Source 4s in the duck blind that was between the candidates, and I ended up having to abandon them because on the reverse shots, you saw those 2 little white specks coming out of the black, and they didn't want anybody to see the 4 cameras that were back there, which were buried in black. Originally, the scene designer had a nice gimmick, which, it's interesting. Bruce Rogers did the same thing at the DNC. They had cameras hidden in that huge back wall, and then they had video walls behind the camera ports that mirrored the graphic on the front of the wall. So you almost never saw the cameras because the video from back to front was layered and blended in. That's the same thing the designer did on this. And unfortunately, you do see a little shadow, but ABC decided they wanted to have that whole middle ground between the candidates to go totally black, which was a shame because it was a nicely crafted graphics. The audience knows there's cameras. You can hide them in a black hole, and the audience reaction is just going to be, oh, the cameras must be hidden in that black hole. I'm always wary of people trying to hide the production techniques because audiences are much more savvy and they're smarter than that. But anyway, I had two little Ecos buried alongside the cameras as well, and I ended up taking those out. And I relied pretty much heavily on the desk eye light, which was a ribbon of environmental design tape in a diffuser channel that we had made to follow the curve, which I do at a lot of anchor desks. It's a nice gimmick to allow anchors to get a little chin light, uplight, eye light fill, and it works pretty well. But that's like the fifth Beatle. That's the eighth light.
That's funny.
Did that answer the question of the
Yeah,
magazine?
yeah, it's great.
I've not seen a debate with lighting that was this dramatic, if you will. Maybe it's appropriate for the moment in history, but did you feel? Did I hear you kind of say that?
100%, Stan. You nailed it there. And I think that's probably what bothered me a bit, if bother is the right word. I'm so used to doing these events where they want them to be more homogenized. This was definitely dramatic.
And I think maybe it makes sense for the moment to sort of say this is a very dramatic debate. David even put in his emails to us, the most, historic debate in recent history. And there's sort of a level of elevated language that I wish we could actually tamp down. But even in the way the debate looked, I was like, I didn't make the association of blue and Democrats, but I did make the association of this is highly stylized, highly theatricalized, and dramatic. But, the tight shots, okay, but when you had those wide shots, they were beautiful, like David said. But I just thought, wow, was that you? How much of that was you, and how much of that were you feel like you were pushed to do that?
The wide shots were totally me because I love doing theatricality and bumpers and as David pointed out, the stark white downlights on the lecterns, all that sort of theatricality. It's what we do as designers, create visual interest. Even when the jib would pull back and reveal the whole room when bumping to a commercial, I probably had 25 lights that were just camera candy pointing at the jib. At one point, I had a lot more red stars than I did when you actually saw it on the air. But it stood out like really, it was out of place to have so much red in that sea of blue. So I went more with red, white, and blue, and I kind of mixed it. But as I said, there were at least 25 lights to create that kind of beautiful starry effect in a black void. Otherwise, it'd pull back and it'd be truly just an ugly black void with me on the upper deck waving to everybody. So you try and put as much prettiness, eye candy, whatever you want to call it, into those wide shots. But when it comes down to the close-up, you really need to be overly cautious about not distracting from the point of focus, which are the words of the candidate. We're always trying to enhance a story and make sure that the words of the writer or the speaker are enhanced. That's what we do. And I think in many ways, it was very successful, regardless of what you feel about bias and prejudice and all this other sort of stuff that came out after the debate. There's no one that can deny that the focus of the candidates was pronounced and definite and was not impaired at all, either by lighting, camera, or scenery, or any production value. And I was a little on the fence about how theatrical and how dramatic it was. But in retrospect, especially after going back and really looking at this to kind of get my thoughts together for the live design article that Ellen is writing, I've changed my opinion about a half a dozen times so far. Overall, I'd say it was a success because it's what was requested by all the parties involved, and they were happy after the fact.
That's what matters in the final analysis.
Yeah, it does.
And also, any expert could tell that this was designed by an artist. And you're so right about telling the story. Getting back to the candidate lighting and all that, I just had one little follow-up there, and that is, with all these different angles that you used, and considering issues like skin tone and makeup and things like that, and of course color, the relativity of color between skin tones and the blue and things like that, what type of color temperatures did you use? Were all those light sources the same color temperature? Did you vary them just a bit? I mean, how did you make that decision?
Because I do so many studios that have video walls. And natively, a lot of these video walls are at 8,000, 9,000 degrees Kelvin. So it's very difficult to go with what we used to do with tungsten. I mean, the Tamron Hall show is running at about 2,000 degrees Kelvin because it's got 70-year-old Bardwell McAllister and Mole Richardson lights that are dimmed down to about 50%. But The View, which was another show I had designed, just moved to a brand new studio that's all video walls. All the lights were thrown out, the old tungsten lights, and it's now all LED moving lights. There's about 300 moving lights in there, and it's all movers. And I had set the balance at 4,500 degrees Kelvin, which is kind of a standard that I use because it's kind of in between 3,200 and 5,600 daylight. And it seems to be a good starting point where the video walls don't have to pull all the way down into the mud because it's very difficult for them to balance down at 3,000 Kelvin, but they have no real problems at 45. But more importantly, the talent doesn't feel like they're in Home Depot. And I've had Diane Sawyer years ago and Robin Roberts on Good Morning America. She'll say to me, Dennis, how come the lighting is so cold on Good Morning America as compared to The View or somewhere else? And I said, a lot of it has to do with the lighting fixtures, but Good Morning America is a studio surrounded by windows, and where there's no windows, there's video walls. So you need to bring the color temperature up to a level that's more in the daylight range. Same thing with the video walls. You're going more in the daylight range so that they don't have to color correct, because color correctors are very expensive, and most of the time these people don't want to buy them or rent them. So you strike an average. That being said, you then adjust from there as you need to. As I said earlier, the Kamala Harris campaign felt that when she looked at herself on camera, she was a little too old, too white, whatever, pasty, whatever word you want to use, and asked me to warm her up. To that end, I decreased the color temperature from the 45 we had established down to 41. And I think maybe on her key light, I might have gone down to 39. Because we have the ability now with moving lights and LEDs to do really minute changes, I very often change color temperature to suit the face of the person I'm lighting. Where back in the old days, we'd be using CTO or CTB or some sort of color correction mylar in the light. But similarly with Donald Trump, who, the guy, and I'm not trying to be derogatory here, but he walks in the room and he looks like orange marmalade is all over his face. He particularly likes that, or he wouldn't do it. So it's important to make sure you don't go so warm that you're detracting from what he must like, while at the same time trying to make his flesh tone look as normal as possible for the cameras.
I have a technical question on this point, if I can interrupt briefly. The color temperature question, we know that the eye recognizes about a 100-degree shift. I don't know about cameras, but when you make those adjustments, and you're actually quoting very specific differences from 45 to 43 or 45 to 42, 41, are you going up there with a meter, or are you doing it on the console, and is the console accurate, or are you just doing it by eye, and you're giving us sort of your estimation of what you think you shifted?
When this was lit, before we started rehearsal, we would meter everything to make sure that it's set. There's so many different lights and fixtures. You can't trust what's in the profile that's in the console. So all of my programmers and my gaffers that I work with know that the first thing they have to do is set up Dennis's TV white. So that if I say, and in some places I go, it might be 4,700, it might be 4,300. Again, it's just a starting point. But they will then, once I'm all hung, they will set TV white for the Chauvet Lico. They'll set it for the Halcyon moving light. They'll set it for the Arri fixture, because every one of these has to be set individually with a meter. Then once we have what I call TV white, then that's the starting point.
Just from my education, so they all start at the metered white.
Now, I will say to my programmer, as in the case of Vice President Harris, take that down to 4,200. Did it go to 4,200? Who the hell knows? But I've got people on the stage asking me to warm it up. Now, I could tell my programmer, warm it up, but what does that mean? He needs to have a stopping point. So I'll give him a number. Now, maybe if I metered it, it was 4,100. Does anybody really care? No. They're looking at a highly balanced monitor, and that now becomes our meter. The monitor is our meter, not a calibrated device. Same thing with foot candles. We'll establish a certain foot candle level, but I've abandoned levels years ago. As a matter of fact, that was one of the questions from the candidates. They wanted to know what the foot candle level was. These people wouldn't know a foot candle if they fell over it. But, I can certainly appreciate it.
They might know a Lumen brother or sister.
Yes.
But yeah.
I remember years ago, well, not that many years ago, 2016, we did a lot of debates because the Republican Party had like 18 candidates and they were doing multiple debates. But I would get these notes from different candidates saying, we require 150 foot candles.
Oh, my God.
And I'd be like, what are you, crazy? I said, when you're doing a football game out there, you don't need that kind. I normally operate at 40 foot candles, 45, somewhere in that neighborhood in the studios because it's comfortable. Just to give you a frame of reference, if 40 foot candles is the norm for, let's say, a show like Tamron Hall, the foot candle level on the candidates and the moderators for this debate was 20 foot candles, which is very dark. I mean, and even Trump, when he stood at the lectern and he said, this is comfortable. I like this lighting. This is good. It was very comfortable. I mean, you're looking straight into light, so it's a little uncomfortable for that in a dark background. But in terms of overall intensity, it was a comfortable level to work under. And the camera, the video shaders, and I worked very closely together. Throughout the show, he's calling me on my phone saying, I need a little more. Please give me a little more. He's wide open on his iris, and then he's adding gain to the camera, which, frankly, I don't give a shit. That just means that the background is going to be a little softer, and there might be a little bit of noise in the camera. Doesn't matter to me because I don't care about the background as much as I do as the face that the camera is going to be in focus on.
I must say that I was very honored that you answered I think you sent me pictures. No, I think I wrote to you and I said, are you lighting this? I think that's how it happened. Like I was watching it. And
during the event. Yeah, I sent you a picture during the event.
Did you send it to me first or did I text you and say, are you lighting this?
You texted me first, yeah.
I did because I saw the drama and I saw the light and I said, I wonder if this is Dennis. And then I was so honored that you actually joined the thing. You wrote back to me or before the thing. You sent me. I saw like the presets, and so thank you very much for
at the Grand MA right there.
Right, I didn't know that Sloan was with you. That was cool.
Yeah,
that's it's fantastic.
But it's interesting because there were so many people like yourself who actually reached out to me to say this is like different.
It was. It was not the typical debate lighting.
No, it wasn't.
And that's what I don't watch a lot of ABC, live television, but I thought, boy, that's really kind of theater, going on there. Yeah.
And in reality, my wife said to me at one point, aren't you working during this? How could you be sending texts? I said,
I sent some of those pictures to a buddy who said, oh, yeah, lights up. And I went, you well know it's not as simple as that to make.
Well, as I said, there's a lot of camera candy and color in the room. That cue had to be brought up every time they went to it. Those lights weren't on during the debate. Similarly, as I mentioned on the angles of light, if Kamala Harris, who, as you remember from the debate, she turned and looked at Trump, stayed right the whole time. So the lights that were on her left, I took them out because I didn't want that conflicting angle brushing across her face. Similarly, Trump.
So is that live? Like
yeah, I'm doing all that live.
So you're anticipating her facial turning her head, and you're working that?
Correct, because at my station, there were 12 cameras in this show. At my station, I have the output of all 12 cameras, so I can preview them before they're taken.
So then write a cue if she looks to the right, you've got a cue to shift to? Well, that? Cue is such a professional word to use. I mean, I'm sort of trying to imagine that scenario.
As you know, or you may have forgotten, I'm a piano player, so
that's right.
All of my board operators operate the console like they're operating a keyboard.
That's right.
My favorite console was the old 96 handle console. It's,
it was interesting because it was in commentary that was made about the debate that she was very effective in using her facial expression to respond rather than words, because people could read that. So in other words, there were some comparisons made to the Nixon-Kennedy debate in terms of how television and being able to use the medium. But Trump himself is also quite adept at being on camera as well. But I think she used it particularly effectively.
It was interesting. She came into the room for the Candidate Walk-Thru the day before, and they looked all around. She looked at herself on monitors. She looked at the lights. I made some adjustments that I wasn't asked to make based on seeing her face and the light and the camera angles, just to make it look better. Similarly with Trump. But when Trump walked into the room, he looked all around the room like a director or a designer or somebody might look to see the production elements. It was very interesting.
Can I ask another technical question?
Sure.
Does the candidate have obviously, if they want to talk to us, the people, they're looking into the lens. But if they have spoken already and they want to see the reaction of their debating partner, do they have a monitor that they can look into, or do they have to glance to their left or right? How does that work?
Interesting question. The way they set the debate up, and you may have seen it on the introduction where David Muir went over all the rules. There was a huge screen, like 16 feet by 12 feet, that was a countdown clock that changed colors when it got to 15 seconds, went yellow, and went to red at 5 seconds. As it got to 0, then they had to stop. Flanking that monitor were 60-inch video monitors that had the line feed so that the candidates could see the line feed at all times. And in that monitor, they also had a clock that was real time. So when the debate started at 9 o'clock, at 9:30, it said 9:30, at 9:45. So they knew how much time was left in the debate. The candidate campaign asked for that monitor to be turned off. They didn't want to see themselves during the debate.
They did it. So in other words, if candidate A wanted to see the reaction of candidate B, they would have to turn their head.
Correct.
They could not catch it in their periphery front vision.
Two-shot. They did see a two-shot.
They didn't see a two-shot.
Right.
And if you remember, most of the show was done in split screen so that both candidates were up all the time so that we could see the reactions. And ABC asked if they wanted the split screen kept up all the time so the candidates could watch. And they said no. They found it distracting.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
But the other interesting thing about that is that behind David Muir and Lindsey Davis, there was another darkened duck blind area that had 3 cameras in it. One was the close-up of President Trump, one was Vice President Harris, and one was the wide shot of the two of them. There are tally lights on the cameras, so you know which camera is on at any given moment. And during the walkthrough, they're pointed out so the candidates know what light is on. Kamala Harris noted that she couldn't quite see Donald Trump's camera to know if the tally light was on, and asked for that camera to be moved so she could see the tally light when it was on. Donald Trump came in, noticed the same exact thing. He said, I can see both tally lights, so I'll know when I'm on and she's on, which I found very interesting that they were very camera savvy, but at the same time, they didn't want to see themselves, which I found interesting.
You know what's interesting about this, too, is that now it really does require a political candidate to have acting skills, to have those kinds of skills. Where once upon a time,
yes,
it's such an important part of their skill set now. Yeah.
Well, you could see the talents of the people themselves. I mean, Kamala Harris is a lawyer, and she came across as a lawyer. Trump is a businessman, not a lawyer. He comes across as a businessman.
Right. Prosecutor versus whatever. I was going to ask if you know anything about their preparation, their rehearsals, and if they're taught these things about the technical, about the cameras and the lights and all that during their prep work. I wonder, now obviously Trump knows because he's been on television quite a bit, but I wonder how much experience Kamala had.
I didn't hear anything about this, but when the handlers come in, and there's a lot of them, trust me, there's an entourage of about 12 people that came in with Kamala Harris. I recognized 2 of them from being with other candidates over the years. You know, they're hiring people, experts, and it's also these same people when Kamala Harris is at the lectern and they're looking at her on camera, these same people will say, can that camera be lower or can the audio be stronger? Can the microphone? I mean, they rebuilt her microphone because it was awkward for her to keep leaning into it. They wanted it more comfortable for her. Similarly with the lectern, you may or may not have noticed that her lectern was shorter than his, because when they were sent the drawings, and she is significantly shorter than he is, they felt that the lectern was going to dominate her and she would look uncomfortable. So they wanted it. And again, my memory of the Commission on Presidential Debates is that they would have said, too bad, because they wanted to be totally equal, all the parameters. But ABC was very, very congenial and concerned about making sure that each candidate had gotten what they wanted in advance to make it as comfortable as possible for them. So it's kind of 2 schools of thought. Do you make it better because they asked? And, you know, I have to think that, granted, Trump has produced television shows. He's been in broadcasting. She hasn't. But they're hiring people that know such things. So all of these requested advice must be coming from the handlers who are being paid to make sure she's presented not only in the best possible light, but in the best possible environment.
Ultimately, I think they both looked terrific. It was an extraordinary job. Kudos to all of you who, pulled this off. I think it was really, really beautiful. And it was sort of amusing afterwards that ABC did this and ABC did that, and that there were all these posts about what you didn't do.
One of the things to also keep in mind, we went there 4 days before the debate. So everything was pulled together in 4 days. And it wasn't just a debate. As I said, Dale Noth, one of our other designers at LDG, designed 2 stages out on Arch Street in front of the Constitution Center, where they broadcast from Good Morning America at 7 a.m. through the post-debate show at midnight, and then Nightline after that. They were broadcasting 20 hours a day. Another stage was the ABC Digital Division, which was streaming news all the time. Another stage was WABC. Another stage was WPVI, which is the Philadelphia ABC affiliate. So these people were broadcasting all the time. The bigger project for me was lighting the building outside. It's a dreary, drab building surrounded by a lot of dark black trees. And at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, it was like shooting into black velour. So we had about 20 or 25 lights just lighting trees and stuff that we had to fight with the National Park Service to allow us to put on the grounds. I mean, And then a mile away, we had the Spin Room, which was the Philadelphia Convention Center, where I had John Reynolds, another one of my lighting designers, design a stage that had 4 people who were commenting the whole time. But there were 1,000 people in there who signed on, not, I don't want to say competitors, but podcasters, newspapers, magazines, other networks, who were all in the Spin Room providing broadcasting to their watchers. And after the event, one of the surprises is that Donald Trump actually went to the Spin Room to, as they say, provide spin control.
I've got a softball question for you. What have you not done that you would still like to do?
Wow.
Such a career. You
know what? I have a lot of friends that I love musicals, and I still do a fair amount of dance. I'll do a dance show every year. I take vacation time to run off and do a dance show. I've been involved with a few Broadway productions where they were videotaped. One was of Mice and Men with James Franco a few years ago that was broadcast on the on National Theater Live in London, where I relit it for the broadcast. Another, I worked with Justin Townsend on a video broadcast of a montage of songs from Moulin Rouge. And it's always a lot of fun to go and work with friends of mine who do Broadway and experience the difference between theatrical lighting and Broadway and broadcast lighting. But I've never, other than doing school plays and community theater and some regional theater, I've never done a Broadway musical. And I think, I don't know, maybe someday before I die, I can get my my notch in the belt for one of those.
Well, we'll make some phone calls on that for you.
Why not?
Yes.
Why not?
Dennis, if you want to know about opera, you can come to San Francisco in October and you can hang out with us.
I did this studio in San Ramon this past week. I actually finished the debate, then flew to San Francisco and drove to San Ramon last week to do this studio for CW Sports. And it was a lot of fun. It's a beautiful area, and I've never really spent time there. So who knows? Maybe I'll be there.
I'll show you Sausalito.
Can I throw a plug out there, though, before we run away? Who is your favorite, most handsomest salesman in the business?
We know that. That's an easy one.
Bobby Hale.
Bobby Hale, an uncommonly good-looking man.
The only reason I bring that up is one of the questions that came up was what type of lighting fixtures I use, and I almost exclusively use high-end fixtures. And somebody asked me once why, and there's a lot of reasons, but because of my nature and the way I am, I always have to say, because of the uncommonly handsome Bobby Hale.
Unbelievably handsome Bobby Hale.
That is so funny.
Yes, he has sold so many lighting fixtures just on his good looks. It's just amazing.
The fixtures are dependable, and it's like an old friend. Sometimes you say, well, I prefer Coke over Pepsi. Half the time, if I'm doing a rental and somebody says, oh, we don't have Solas, we have Robies. Yeah, fine, whatever. On this particular job, I find that I can work faster, quicker, easier with the high-end systems lights. As a matter of fact, in the new Disney studios I'm doing right now, where The View moved into, I think we bought close to 500 moving lights from high-end systems that are going in those studios, because I find them personally easier. I'm comfortable. Yeah, comfortable is a good word.
Comfortable.
And Bobby Hale, he's Bobby Hale.
Well, it's like Apple. They just work, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
They're good lights. They're very
but
good
there's
lights.
a lot of
we
good
love
stuff
Bobby.
out there.
I got one more thing to find out before we close, and I'm stunned at my friend Snoot. What is the problem? What's this Watson, Leitner, and Bean thing? What is going on?
She's going to have to come on and explain the change in personnel.
Oh, my God.
There's a story there, but we are not.
I want to hear it.
We are not at liberty to disclose because it's an internal thing within the Snoot group. So she has some NDA she has to work out. Then she'll be able to disclose that data. I think it's in development.
Well, concerned listeners want to know, and there's got to be a backstory.
Stan is being very, very sort of confidential on this, but I will just say it. It all started with Stan.
I know it did.
That's what I'm going to say. It just started with Stan.
The guy's retired. He shouldn't be getting himself in trouble with the law.
Yeah, it's like it's unbelievable.
Look,
what's happening.
It might be leaked to some of my former students who are now at the LDG studio. So maybe you could do a little snooping.
Snooping.
You guys are funny.
Okay. Dennis, thank you again for being with us.
You're most
We're going to have
welcome.
you back on the show more often, but it sounds like you're going to be pretty busy for the next several
This
years.
show is important for students and designers and teachers to listen to. A lot of really good information here, both intriguing about the intrigue of a presidential debate and the lighting information, all wrapped up in one show.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad it was useful. Most of the time, we just bullshit.
Well, that's true, too.
In fact, I've been texting my predecessor, who's now running my old program, saying you need to listen to this show and you have your students listen to it this weekend because it's really good stuff.
Good. Well, thank you for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure, gentlemen and ladies.
Always a pleasure.
Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tell us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website at lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
If you decide to litigate the Snook Group with the legal team of Watson, Leitner, and Beam, will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers and Sister, coming to you from Long Beach, California, St. Bart's, Gainesville, Florida, Port Washington, New York, and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you more of our casserole of nonsense.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
Once again, thank you, Dennis. We love you, and good travels. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Bye-bye.
Remember, everybody, get out there and vote.
Vote, yes. Vote, vote, vote.